One of the common things that I have to look for when I have a patient who is autoimmune is we often try to get to like where the roots are. And one of the things that I see a lot is mold exposure. And mold exposure, if you've had these diagnoses, you're going to know what I'm talking about. Mold exposure and Lyme disease look really similar, and they overlap a little bit as well. And out of that, these very, very complex cases, you can end up with an autoimmune issue where your body attacks itself, is one of the mechanisms. It's not the only reason. The most common reason that you get autoimmune disease is actually a leaky gut, and that causes cross-reactivity. As food particles get into the bloodstream, the immune system attacks them because it says you're not supposed to be here, and you can get what's called cross-reactivity, or those inflammatory issues can lodge in tissues, and then the immune system goes after those tissues. But another thing that can happen is if you are exposed to mold, mold releases something called mycotoxins, and those mycotoxins are what we actually react to. And there is a really great test called mymoldantibody.com that actually looks at what antibodies we have to the actual mycotoxin, which is what you need to test, not do you have an immune response to mold, right? Because that could be 10 years old because your immune system has a memory, which is a whole different conversation. But as I go through and I check people, I'm looking to see also if they have these mycotoxin antibodies, and those will go away as the mycotoxins go away. So it's actually a really great way to measure progression and function. So it's never normal to attack your own body, ever. And we're designed to handle mold, except when our immune system starts to become dysregulated, which is always the root. And that root happens on top of a gut. I sound like a broken record. I say it all the time, but it's not talked about, and it's very real. And, I think to a patient of mine who, this can happen a lot, where you're out in the world and you're talking about your journey and what you're doing, and people are like, well, that's not real. Why are you doing that? How can they tell that you have a candida overgrowth or that you have a mold infection? If we don't have lab tests, there are lab tests, just for the record, that you can do to check these, but you can also see a lot based on symptoms. And I think that we forget that you are not a lab test result. You are a complex clinical picture. And if your doctor or anyone that you're seeing is not looking at you like that, you really, really owe it to yourself to find a new one, because you have to look at the symptoms as well as the information that you get, the clinical data on lab testing, to get a full and cohesive picture. And that's what a really good functional medicine doctor will do, is they won't treat you for a low testosterone. They'll see, do you have symptoms of low testosterone? If so, how do we fix upstream and what's going on up here, and maybe support down here for testosterone, right, as an example. But I don't know how I got off on this. It's like such a tangent. But if you aren't being treated like a whole person, know that that's really important. And if you've had a mold exposure, or you suspect you have a mold exposure, that lab you can go to directly would be really important for you to check out. It's easy to see if you have a response going on to the actual mycotoxins. And unfortunately, we see this a lot, and it's really not tested most of the time in most people who aren't seeing me and other really good functional medicine doctors. They just don't look for that stuff. So I hope that's helpful.